I was thinking about how people tend to express disagreement. How, at least in my culture, so to speak, a lot of disagreements, debates, and arguments, people talk about them like through the terms of like winning, or somehow humiliating. Sometimes even like humiliating or dragging the other person, or you know showing other people up. There's lots of ego games. You can especially see this very amplified on Twitter. It drives me crazy when I see people having an argument. Instead of just try to addressing the points, they'll put these little ego barbs and like, oh, you're a dumbass, or like sometimes not quite as obvious as that, but it's that of course is completely at odds with coming to any kind of understanding. I mean, what is the point of arguing? In my opinion, one of the biggest parts of it is understanding what you actually disagree about and trying to reach, at least for yourself, an understanding of why you disagree with people, what your fundamental difference is, what is the actual irreconcilable difference between you. I don't have an example offhand. But a lot of people argue about things that don't reflect a real disagreement, or don't necessarily reflect a real difference in values. It's just that each of us has a very limited perspective. And so we may share a value with another person, but because we've had different experiences and perhaps different opinions on how the world works and how human nature works, we'll be in disagreement with a person that we might otherwise be allies with. You can find examples of, what's the term I'm thinking of, like wrong disagreements, disagreements that don't actually reflect a real irreconcilable difference. You can find these everywhere, from politics to interpersonal conflicts to, debates within a field of study. It's everywhere, so it's weirdly hard to come up with an example as I'm thinking about it now. But one that's often relevant to me is when people talk about magic or the supernatural. It's often like people often are talking about different concepts when they argue about them. I don't know if that's the best example of, well, whatever. I'm smoking. It's not supposed to make a whole ton of sense. Well, even with a lack of examples, I guess I would, give advice to people thinking about conflicts. Try to find out what it is you actually disagree on. And also, find the things you do agree on. Because if you can get yourself, I guess the idea is kind of to get yourself on the same side as a person, because ultimately, I guess, this might be a little idealistic, but ultimately I don't like the idea or don't really believe in the idea of there being like completely opposed sides in any human conflicts. I think we rise or fall as a species. You know, I guess not to be too grand and poetic, but ultimately I think the only real fight that is worth fighting is the fight against death, you know, so to speak, be it literal or figurative. But like, death is always a worthy foe because it is coming, no matter what, no matter how long we may prolong our lives. Death will come, even if we manage to live until the heat death of the universe, you know, like. But we can prolong life, we can prolong happiness, we can fight against the things that make us unhappy and afraid. And I feel like I would like more people to frame conflicts and frame conflicts this way of like, it's not example, like, as an atheist, it's not necessarily me versus religion, or it's humans versus superstition. I mean, that's how I see it. It might not, that might sound condescending to a religious person, but like, what I want with you, even if we disagree about things, is I want to discover, you know, I want to figure out what the truth is. I want to figure out what the most ethical way of being is. I want to work towards systems where all humans, or as many humans as possible, thrive. You know, I'm not content to like let conflicts just stand if they can't be somehow resolved. You know, it's not, you know, when it comes to big political things, like, it's not black versus white, it's humans versus racism. And, you know, conflict like that is especially hard because the enemy lives inside human brains. The enemy hijacks human brains. That's what racism is. Or many other kinds of bigotry. It's not a person or a thing, it's an idea. It just survives in human brains. And the people that racism or any other bigotry is, I like to think of brains as being infected by this. As no healthy human brain ideally would have these, overtly bigoted ideas. And although I'm very, very much in favor of shutting down and disenfranchising racism and racists wherever we can, I would much rather any day would much rather see those same people realize how they were wrong and change their mind willingly and, come around and be on the side of, happiness and equality and all that good stuff. I'd much rather see that, all things considered. Like, I don't want to see people as my enemy. I want to see the enemy as, like, ignorance and, bad ideas, and the simple fact of limited resources is the enemy. The inevitable death of everyone is the enemy. I guess my advice, if anyone was asking for it, is if you're in a disagreement or you're witnessing one, try to figure out what the real conflict is about. This does require extending some empathy to the person you're disagreeing with. And I'm really talking about this in terms of, like, equal social relationships. This isn't necessarily where there's a power or authority imbalance. But, or maybe when there is, I don't know. I mean, within families, it's more on a peer human level and not so much like an institutional level. Disagreement with institutions is a totally different thing. But, understand that whatever the disagreement is, ultimately I think you dig deep down and the person is simply expressing some human need. They're however misguidedly all of us are trying to get our just basic needs met. But so how do you figure out what you agree and disagree on? I mean, one thing is to make sure you're defining terms the same way. Like, some words are really hard to define and make for disagreements, like the word, say, spiritual, off the top of my head. I mean, that word is so completely set, it's almost a useless word in how little it means. Like, if you're having an argument with someone about spirituality, maybe try to have it without the word itself. So I guess that could, one thing you can do is express your needs in different words. I don't know. I'm just... But find where you agree and start there. And, try to follow logical steps from wherever you are that you agree and see where the breakdown is, what logical step you disagree with. You may not agree, but at least you might not come to agree, you might not reconcile, but at least you get information about how the other person thinks and what they need and what they think is fair. I shouldn't call these rants. I should call these rambles. I'm a rambling girl. Paraphrase Steve Martin. Yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, oh yeah, rambling girl. But hey, I don't seem to be able to be bothered to currently put my ideas together in more coherent, coalesced forms, so I might as well just run the mouth here. Who cares? Who's watching? Who cares? If it's just a few of my friends who watch these and, get something out of it, even that is great. Also, trying to sort of feel less shame around my weed habit, because it's not for everybody, and some people might look down on someone who has, such, I guess you could call it a habit, yeah. But hey, it's part of my life right now. I might as well embrace it. I guess to come back full circle to my observation that people get into disagreements and debates and they're preoccupied with winning, taking a superior position. I think that this is just occurring to me, but just the very concept of winning a debate is almost, it's kind of authoritarian. It's about putting yourself in a superior position, a position with more power of some sort, if nothing else other than social capital. But obviously I usually go into a situation thinking I'm right, and usually I want to convince another person of my position. But ultimately what I'm interested in is not being right, because who the fuck cares? Is becoming right, is coming to a better understanding of the issues, and none of us is an island, and none of us can understand things on our own. We have to constantly be listening to other people's experiences, interpretations, because everybody's experience, everybody's emotions, everybody's sensations, whatever, are just as real and valid as anyone else's. You know, ultimately, I guess I want arguments. I prefer arguments to. I would prefer arguments to serve truth and beauty, you could say, to serve the pursuit of understanding, to serve humans working better together with each other, to serve our fight against the only worthy foe, death. Ignorance, I guess, could be in there. Mortality. Being physical, that's our enemy. We have these mental experiences that feel like they should go on forever, but we live in these very not forever bodies with these very silly brains. Well, live long and prosper.